Hi, welcome to week 7 and apparently week 8 of my journey to a master's degree in responsible artificial intelligence. I am Rem and I am a student of Open Institute of Technology. So the reason that I'm recording week 7 and week 8 in the same video is because in week 7, which was supposed to be what we call reading week, in which there's no assignments and not much in terms of content for that week. I decided to reorganize my notes using a framework called Zettelkasten. And it actually took a lot of my time during reading week. And I'm still not finished actually, but I think a lot of the major notes are already transferred to that new system. So I'm actually enjoying it. But the video is not about that. I'll be creating maybe a separate video about Zettelkasten. But yeah, there's a lot of videos out there, but I want to share my experience with it. Maybe I could do that, once I finish reorganizing everything. Like I said in my previous videos, I planned on actually bringing up the anxiety of having to write your paper so that it doesn't get flagged by AI detectors. So I raised that during my AI and ethics class, and I already know the answer to the question. But yeah, my professor just echoed what I already was thinking, in which we all just have to live with this, at least for the time being, until something better comes out. But the professor reassured me not to worry about it too much as long as you know that you put in the work yourself. And even if you use AI, as long as you don't copy paste it verbatim, you'll be fine. I mean, the anxiety is always going to be there, but at least the anxiety of having to start a paper from, a blank page has been replaced by this. You could now start, writing or building up ideas. Unlike before, when there's a blank paper in front of you, it's hard to really get started. But now, you can have a conversation with AI to come up with initial ideas that could get the creative juices flowing. We didn't have that before, but we have that now with AI. But yeah, there's a trade-off of that anxiety of being flagged by AI detectors. One thing I really enjoyed during reading week was when our professor in our machine learning class decided to share his experiences as a machine learning engineer building a large language model for one of the big tech companies. I won't say which, but one of the big names. And for this particular session, he shared what goes on with data pre-processing. Not actually training, but the things that go on even before you start training the model. So this was an eye-opener for me because I've always thought that the bulk of the work and the bulk of the energy and water consumption goes to training of the data and inference. Apparently, just that's just a part of it. But a lot of the resources also go into training. So what happens is they get this huge corpus of data scraped from the internet. And actually, you could look this up. It's part of the initiative done by an organization called Common Crawl. So Common Crawl is a website that hosts updated crawled web data. And as of this recording, They have almost 500 terabytes of web data scraped. And from this 500 terabytes of web data, during pre-processing, at the best case scenario, only 10% of that actually goes through to the training phase. The rest, 90% or more, gets discarded. And that process of actually distilling the data from, removing irrelevant data, removing spam, filtering out explicit content, deduplicating data, it takes a lot of effort and resources to do that. Like the duplication itself, after you filter out all the data that you don't need, you need to also make sure that you don't have duplicate data so that you could optimize the data set so that during the training phase it would be more efficient. That process itself of the duplicating, you have to match your data against itself. And that process by itself is a quadratic operation. In computer science terms, that is a very expensive operation. So if you do the math, right, you have 500 terabytes of data, 10% of that, it's 50 terabytes. So you have 50 terabytes that you have to iterate through to compare to itself. So that's multiplying by itself, right? That's a very inefficient operation. So it actually made me think more about the sustainability of large language models at their current state. It convinces me more that just pouring money on the large language model problem to make it, perform better isn't going to be sustainable. So there's a lot of talk about AI being in a bubble, and I do truly believe that it is, especially in the economic sense. In terms of, usability, it's going to stay here. There's a lot of awesome things that you could do with AI. Not only LLMs, but, the other flavors of AI, of machine learning. But yeah, in terms of the economics of it, the financial side of it, nothing really makes sense, especially in generative AI. If the data preparation itself is already consuming a lot of resources, energy, fresh water, this is going to suck, right? And mind you, pre-processing doesn't get done in just one go. You have to tune the process, right? Uh, because you have parameters you have to tweak. So you have to do it, trial and error, right? So one run of 500 terabytes, okay. So at the end of the pre-processing, probably, especially on the first few runs, you won't be satisfied with the data you end up with. So you have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it again and repeat that quadratic processes again and again. So yeah, I don't know how they could make this into a profitable business, but let's see. Maybe they have something up their sleeves, but I'm highly skeptical. But yeah, that's week 7, the reading week. Very, very insightful. But moving on to week 8, at the start of the week, I approached my AI and ethics professor. So, a bit of context. A couple of weeks ago, our professor mentioned that they are working on a project involving having people red teaming LLMs. What does LLM red teaming mean? Red teaming is a term that originates from cybersecurity. So, large language models have a lot of vulnerabilities. Although, of course, they're researching on how to make large language models more secure, instituting guardrails here and there. But the fact of the matter is, LLMs are probabilistic, and AI in general is probabilistic. So it's very hard to actually implement hard rules around it, solid safeguards. There's going to be exploitable areas in it. And that's where red teaming comes in. So red teamers try to find exploits on a system, and in the context of large language models, we are trying to break through these guardrails. So, for example, often large language models have guardrails, racism. Someone from, red team will try to break that, will try to force the large language model to produce content that's racist. So that's a very interesting project for me. But I was actually worried about the time commitment. But after talking to the professor, he told me that there's no real pressure in terms of, time commitments, except if you wanna work in the research part of it. But if you're just going to take on tasks, there's no real deadline or whatever. Just, you know, do it at your own pace. So yeah, I volunteered and still waiting for my first task. And I'm really excited about it because I've been reading on how to get into AI governance. And one of the skills that you could build in order to get into AI governance is red teaming. So red teaming itself is very interesting, and it's just a bonus that it could be part of the skill set that I could leverage to get into AI governance and AI policy. Now that I mention it, let me get into that. Yeah, I have plans of getting into AI governance. Maybe I don't know. Not sure if it's going to be full time. From my research, it is something that's still very new. No one really knows how AI governance will look like, and no one's really an expert yet, since everything's moving so fast and large language models have just come into mainstream, just a couple of years ago. So everyone's just figuring this out. And I think, this is a huge opportunity for me and for people who are interested in making sure that AI is being used for good to come in and try to mold this into something that's concrete. With my advocacy against irresponsible AI and unethical AI, this really aligns with what I want to do. So yeah, I've been looking into it, and I just found out that there's a relatively new certification that I could take. It's kind of pricey, around, I think almost 800, 900 euros. It's called the AI Governance Professional Certification. And yeah, it's what I'm reading, it's a hard exam to pass, but I'm hoping I could work on it maybe during the end of year break while I'm on leave, and also, it coincides with the school break. So that's what I'm planning to do this coming holidays, and, crossing my fingers. I think it involves a lot of legal frameworks, like, the EU AI Act and a few ISO standards that one can use in industry. And yeah, again, it's still an evolving field. And just past week, they announced that they're going to change the body of knowledge that's included in the exam. So that takes effect at the start of February next year. So that gives me a bit of a deadline to pull this off, because if I study for the exam and try to pass it before that, that would be good, because right after that, the content that one needs to go through to pass the exam will become larger and harder. So yeah, I'm kind of racing on the clock right now. I wish I had known about this earlier, but yeah, luckily one of my classmates just got certified for AIGP, and I am meaning to actually reach out to him and get some advice on how to do it. And yeah, pretty excited about that. But yeah, I think that's the highlight of week 8, 5 weeks before the term ends. So just a bit more push. The irony again, we've had that light reading week, but in the past couple of weeks, I've been kind of sleep deprived trying to catch up with organizing my notes and also converting all notes that I get from new content to the new system. The downside of the Zettelkasten system is there's a huge upfront effort that needs to be done so that things would pay off hopefully in a few months or in a few years from now. So yeah, I think that's the update. Thank you for sticking through the whole video, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.